everybody, welcome to the bonus video for October 2023. I hope you're all feeling fine and dandy. There's quite a bit happening in Beatle world at the moment. I just saw Paul McCartney perform live. There's about to be a new Beatles song drop in a few days, plus all these remasters happening from the Red and Blue albums. Yeah, there's a ton going on. I'll be making videos about all that stuff, but for now, let's get a little bit more cozy and low-key as we discuss the life and work of Linda McCartney. This suggestion was sent in from patron Kate Harrington, so thank you, Kate. The other patrons absolutely ate this suggestion up. So, Linda McCartney, photographer, musician, activist, and wife and muse of Paul McCartney from the late 60s all the way up to 1998, when she died of cancer aged 56. This means that Linda's presence and influence lasted a good 30 years, and in that time she achieved so much, and for me is easily my favorite of all the Beatle wives and girlfriends. I'm not going to make this video a biography of Linda, but more, as Kate suggested, my take on her as photographer, musician, muse, and activist. Let's start with the element of her life that she was perhaps most accomplished at, which would be her photography. Linda McCartney's photography will, I believe, be her longest lasting legacy. Her style is not only influential on my and my girlfriend's photographic approach, but what Linda's lens was able to capture in the world of rock and roll stands completely on its own. Starting out in New York City as a single mother, going to gigs on public transport and elbowing her way to the front of the crowd where she would shoot photos for the likes of Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, and Jimi Hendrix. Her photographs on that yacht with the Rolling Stones capture a more relaxed and casually sexy vibe, which, if you're talking about rock and roll stars, would of course be the more ideal approach. But this was a time when stiff poses and unimaginative group shots were still the norm. Linda came in and enmeshed herself with these musicians, talking, laughing, flirting, and then before anyone could realize what had happened, she'd whip out her camera and pap them in an incredibly natural state. No light setup, no assistant, just whatever natural light was on offer and her own keen eye. This is how she and Paul met initially, when Linda was taking photos of the Beatles at the Sgt. Pepper album launch. Eventually the two started seeing each other, and now the Fab Four were her subjects, and from this period we get some truly wonderful snaps of the Beatles recording the White Album and Let It Be that are some of my favorite shots of the guys. They're at once intimate and deeply captivating. Her introduction in Get Back shows exactly how charming and gentle her presence was. Just a girl in her 20s in a knitted jumper and skirt who was at the forefront of rock and roll photography. After the Beatles split, taking photos of rock stars seemed somewhat redundant now that she had one of her own. So Paul and Linda escaped to their farm in Scotland, where she took some of my all-time favorite photos in existence. These photos of Paul, the farm, the animals, and their growing stable of children offer the best of Linda McCartney's photographic eye, in my opinion. So much charm, so much life, so much nature and wonder. They just make me very happy. This was a bittersweet, even depressing time for Paul, and you know Linda was keeping him together, so to capture this delicate period in stunning bucolic photographs is something I will always be very grateful for. Plus, it's where we get our best McBeardy content. If you've watched any of my YouTube videos from 2021 onwards, you will have automatically seen her photography, albeit very small and out of focus. Behind me, on the bookshelf next to my girlfriend Lauren's desk, are a bunch of miscellaneous postcards and photos, and one of them is this one of Paul. Oh, and I forgot we also have this one on the left. This one that Paul took of Linda at work, which I think is really charming. And finally, this one of George Harrison that I just adore. I also have an additional print of this near my desk. Lauren and I both just adore this shot. Because alongside Paul, you've got baby Mary, Heather, and their dog Martha. The sunny skies, the rolling hills, and the pure joy emanating from Paul is just priceless. When we started getting into Linda's photography, Lauren and I ourselves had started shooting similar photos on our own film cameras, and hopefully the influence is coming across. So we bought that print and several others at the Linda McCartney retrospective exhibit, which came to my state in late 2021, right after Get Back, so the timing was perfect. This was also a special time for me, as I'd recently released my Paul McCartney album ranking, so I was really in a perfect mindset to reflect on Linda's photography. It turned out to be what I now consider my favorite photo exhibition that I've ever been to. To celebrate our love for Linda's work, we bought this excellent coffee table book of her photographs that I can highly recommend. It's called Linda McCartney, Life in Photographs. Really stunning design and just some excellent stuff in here. There's that photo. And they go from the 60s all the way through to the 90s. Just countless pictures of the PR Beatle with his guard down and just being a regular guy, a farmer, a goofball, a loving dad. The quote from the beginning of the book is from Linda and reads, "Shadows in light and shade, seeing all things, common or obscure, I click." And the curator of the exhibition said this of Linda, and it's where I'll leave it for this section of the video. Quote, "In the vein of Dorothea Lange and Walker Evans, Linda often captured the subtle and the fortuitous rather than the staged moments. Linda used the tools at her disposal to create moving and intimate portraits, creating a new perspective in rock and roll photography. She captured the essence of those around her, providing insight into the personal lives of iconic artists and that of her family in later life." I forgot to mention as well that Linda McCartney was the first woman to have her photo featured on the cover of Rolling Stone, so huge props to her. So now I'd like to discuss Linda as a muse. Now, clearly I'll be talking about Linda as a muse for Paul McCartney, but did you know that years before she even met her soulmate, Linda was the subject of a completely different song? And when I say years before, I mean it.
We pass on the street, my heart skips a beat, I say to myself, hello, Linda.
The song in question was written by Jack Lawrence in 1942 when he was in the service during the war. The song, called Linda, is about the baby of his attorney, Lee Eastman, who is, of course, Linda's father. Many people, many groups, including Jan and Dean, did their own version of it, which even got to number 28 on the Billboard chart. But anyway, Linda is absolutely more known for the songs created by Paul McCartney. Starting off with the late 60s with songs like Two of Us, which many believe to be about John and Paul, but was actually written while Paul and Linda were on a date. There's even a photo of him writing the song that was captured by Linda. And a quote from Paul McCartney to accompany it: "It's a favorite of mine because it reminds me of that period, getting together with Linda and the wonderfully free attitude we were able to have. I had my guitar with me and I wrote it out on the road and then maybe finished some of the verses at home later, but that picture is of me writing it." Then there's the beautiful love songs he wrote about Linda, which according to McCartney is any love song he wrote while they were together. But ones that stand out to me are My Love from Red Rose Speedway, which Paul called his definitive love song for her. I personally think maybe I'm Amazed from his debut McCartney album is a better and more earnest composition. From that same album, we have The Lovely Linda, which was an improvised track while Paul was figuring out his at-home recording equipment and Linda came walking through the door. On Wings at the Speed of Sound, Paul wrote an absolutely beguiling song for Linda called Warm and Beautiful that is one of his best unsung love songs. But Linda as a muse made the strongest impact for me on Ram, of course. From the ethereal chorus of Long-Haired Lady to the cozy charm of Eat at Home, Linda's horse girl influence is the beating heart of that album. As you would probably know by now, it is my favorite McCartney album and the only one credited to both Paul and Linda. Part of why I love Ram so much perhaps comes from Linda's love, care, and support in Paul's life, especially during this period. It gave him this new creative energy and the courage to try something fresh and totally out there, and it results in one of my favorite albums of all time. There's a lot more of Linda as Muse that I could dive into, from Paul's very first single, Another Day, to his sincere midlife honesty in a song like Press from Press to Play. To be a fan of Paul McCartney's solo work is to bask in the loving inspiration of Linda herself, and it is to her credit that Paul was able to spin so much gold out of such an incredible woman. Now I'd like to talk about the music that Linda herself created. In the early 70s, Linda learned how to play basic notes and chords on the keyboard and joined Paul in his second band, Wings. Linda's presence was felt strongest in her backing vocals, which were by no means angelic or even in tune some of the time, but she knew this herself and leaned into a more strange and exaggerated vocal that I've always appreciated from Linda. And even when she needed to offer those more sweet harmonies, like for example in the aforementioned song Long-Haired Lady, she was perfectly capable of giving us some serene and very pleasant vocals. In terms of stage presence in live shows, that was never really Linda's thing. She wasn't stiff or wooden or anything like that. But as she was in interviews, Linda came across as shy and definitely not extroverted like her showman husband. She was just chill and relaxed, and that in itself was part of her charm. While she contributed some of her own compositions across Wings' career, they were few and far between, and so after her death, Paul collected all of the songs she wrote, co-wrote, or covered and compiled them into an album called Wide Prairie. I would not call this album essential listening, but if you're a fan of Wings, a fan of Ram, or just curious to see what else Linda had to offer musically, it's a fascinating insight into her songwriting with songs spanning 3 whole decades. I won't go super in depth, but here's a little song-by-song review of the album. Opening with the title track, Wide Prairie, which was recorded in November 1973. I like this track. It's got this kind of goofy country voice and rootin' tootin' violin sound, and it's a style that Linda sits very comfortably in.
Well, I was born in Arizona.
It's got that early 70s provincial vibe that I love from Wings from this time. Then on the track New Orleans, which was recorded during the Venus and Mars sessions in February 1975, and further recording taking place in May 1979. This is a bit of a New Orleans-y type sound with this groovy piano, tambourine, and trombone featuring more of those exaggerated vocals from Linda. Then we dip into the late 80s, a song recorded in 1988 and then 1989, The White Coated Man, co-written by Paul and Carla Lane. This is a song that criticized the practice of vivisection, which is basically experimental surgery on living animals like mice and pigs, which I'll delve further into the next section of this video. It's got a bit of a new wave sound and it's just Linda getting her activist hat on and singing about animal rights. That's her bag. Then we go back to October 1980 with the song Love's Full Glory, which is a ballad with plenty of Linda's quirky flair that bridges the soft rock sounds of the 70s with a new wave singing style of the 80s.
Far away, a distant love affair.
Following that, we've got I Got Up, where the backing track was recorded in November 1973, and the vocals weren't put on until 1998, shortly before her death. It's a perky rock and roll track, and it's filled with plenty of attitude from Linda that I very much appreciate. Paul said of this track, quote, "Its gutsy feel is typical of her unwillingness to put up with other people's bullshit. She hated words like should and compromise. For her, freedom to do what you want was a basic right." Continuing with the more attitude-heavy songs, we've got The Light Comes From Within. This song was actually Linda's final recording before her death and was recorded with Paul and their son James in March of 1998. You can tell her voice sounds quite a bit older, but she's also never been more riled up and filled with attitude. With the opening lyrics, "You say I'm lazy, you say I don't fit. Takes one to know one, you make me sick. You say I'm simple, you say I'm a hick. Linda was not holding back. The key lyric of the song is, "Oppression won't win, the light comes from within," which I think is a pretty good lyric. Perhaps George Harrison took his cue for his final song, Brainwash, from this track, as kind of like a, final denouncement of all that, I suppose, upsets you and angers you. According to Paul, quote, "It was her answer to all the people who had ever put her down and that whole dumb male chauvinist attitude that to her had caused so much harm in our society. God bless her. My little baby literally had the last word. She also loved the idea of our son James playing guitar on it." Then we've got a cover of Mr. Sandman, an unexpected reggae version of the 50s classic, recorded in Jamaica in June 1977. I don't mind it. I mean, it's always pretty easy to listen to reggae. It never demands too much of your attention. It's just a chill time. One of the few tracks that I actually knew from this album before I listened to it was Seaside Woman, recorded in November 1972 and released as a single in May 1977 when Wings went under the pseudonym Susie and the Red Stripes.
Oh, Papa, catch the fish from the bottom of the sea.
According to Paul, it was the first song that Linda wrote and was a response to a lawsuit from Northern Songs that, long story short, alleged Linda wasn't a songwriter, so she wrote Seaside Woman to prove it. There was another one recorded in Jamaica where the Caribbean lifestyle really inspired this very groovy track. Yeah, I think it's probably my favorite of Linda's compositions. Paul does a really great job of delivering this funky bass line and these atmospheric harmonies. Denny Lane also does a decent job with the guitar solo. It just has a lot of personality, this track, and I really love Linda's vocal as well. Then on the song Oriental Nightfish, which was recorded in October 1973 during the Band on the Run sessions, and got to 59 on the US charts. It's a bit of a weird cosmic song with a bit of spoken word singing, and there's this video that accompanied it that I saw at the photography exhibition 2 years ago.
The colors were swirling. The room was getting hotter.
Cool shit. Moody, it's psychedelic with some tootling flutes, and yeah, get around it. Then on Endless Days, a track co-written with Mick Bolton, recorded in October 1987. This song is a simple little tune where Linda tries out a more stripped back, authentic singing voice, and it's unfortunately not her strong suit, I think.
Endless days and lonely nights, I cry out, baby, when will you come back to me?
I think she's always better when she makes her vocals weird and exaggerated. You know, she's not a trained singer, so I think, you know, doing something a little bit different was always where she shone. Here, she just struggles to stay in tune and her breath control doesn't carry the words out fully. I was listening to the chorus of this track and I was like,
Endless days and lonely nights.
where have I heard this melody before? Then I realized it. Yeah, it's one of the main themes from Spirited Away, the Hayao Miyazaki movie with music by Joe Hisaishi. And Endless Days came before Spirited Away, so maybe he copied? Unlikely, no. It was very much a coincidence, but a fun coincidence nonetheless. Another cover by the Coasters. We've got Poison Ivy, recorded in October 1987. The Coasters are one of Linda's favorite 50s groups, and she does a decent cover, but that's about it. Then on the song Cow, written by Linda, Paul, and Carla Lane once again, recorded in July 1988. This is a very quirky, toy-like sound that's almost 8-bit, like a video game.
Placid creature.
The texture of the song really piqued my interest. It's sung to a sweet cow that's sadly about to be slaughtered for meat, which is another instance of Linda incorporating her activism into her songwriting. A sweet guitar solo too, not bad. So when Seaside Woman was released as a single, it had to have a B-side, so Linda wrote the song with Paul, B-side to Seaside.
I need a B-side, B-side to seaside.
It's about as literal as you can get. It's a bit of a throwaway track. It has most in common with songs from London Town because it was written around that same period. Then on Sugar Time, a cover by the Maguire sisters, that reggae flair is back with a vengeance for this song, recorded in June 1977. The penultimate song of the album is Cook of the House, which is probably the one that you will all know if you've heard the album Wings at the Speed of Sound. It's a very 50s inspired track. It's a mono recording to keep it in line with that 50s sound, except for the sizzling bacon, which is recorded in stereo. A neat little ditty by Linda, who simply loved to cook, and while renting a house on tour in Australia, noticed a plaque on the kitchen that said, "Wherever I serve my guests, they like my kitchen best," and so it included it in the song. And finally, the last track is Appaloosa, which was recorded on March 7th, 1998 in Paul's studio, inspired by the history of the Nez Perce tribe and their Appaloosa horses. But Linda, who was in love with Arizona, she lived there for a portion of her life. She mentions Arizona in Wide Prairie, and forever a horse girl that she was, she recorded this as one of her final songs that she ever recorded. It's got a bit of a Flaming Pie vibe, because again, it was written around that time. And the final strings at the end are just a lovely way of closing the album. Paul really put a lot of care and attention to this. You can really tell. It's not an essential album. I wouldn't put this on probably at any point, but I'm glad I've listened to it. And it does show you the breadth of Linda McCartney's skills as a musician and singer. I'd like to finish the video now by talking about Linda McCartney's activism.
Oh, seaside woman.
And when I married Paul, he had a farm out in Scotland and he took me up there and I loved it. And there were sheep everywhere. Oh, lovely sheep. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it wonderful? And then we sat down to have leg of lamb or leg of sheep. And it was like, wait a minute, those little cute lambs out there and we're eating. And we looked at each other and went, So we stopped eating flesh.
This is a cute story because it's the same way that I realized when I was a kid that I also didn't want to eat meat, or at least lamb, which is very popular in Australia. Linda explained her change to vegetarianism by saying that she did not, quote, eat anything with a face. If slaughterhouses had glass walls, the whole world would be vegetarian. As you can see from her songwriting, this animal rights activism was something imbued in Linda's life, and she was a regular supporter of organisations like the Council for the Protection of Rural England, Friends of the Earth, and most notably PETA, whom she even shot a few commercials with.
People go, fish don't have feelings. I'll go, have you ever seen a fish gasping for breath when you take it out of the water? They're saying, thanks a lot for killing me, it feels great, you know? No, it hurts.
Speaking of ads, towards the end of the 80s, Linda had released her first vegetarian cookbook, Linda McCartney's Home Cooking, and in 1991 started her own company called Linda McCartney Foods that serves frozen vegetable meals and led to commercials like this one. And even these days, Mary and Stella especially continue to spread the good word of vegetarianism with Linda McCartney's Kindness Forever campaign.
Linda McCartney Foods. Kindness forever.
Oh, also there's a 2-page spread about it in the Paul McCartney Got Back official tour book, which I thought was really sweet. Mum believed in people and the planet. We're proud to celebrate her legacy, making delicious vegetarian food that's good for animals, the planet, and you. As a pescatarian myself, meaning I eat fish but no other meat, I've always wanted to try some of the fake meat sausages and burgers from Linda McCartney Foods, but they're hard to come by in Australia, and as a result, very expensive from the ones that I've seen, but they look delicious. But really, Linda McCartney deserves a lot of credit for popularizing going veg at a time when it wasn't at all popular. These days, it's fairly simple. We take it for granted, at least in most Western countries, being able to find vegetarian or even vegan options. But Linda McCartney, she was a true pioneer in the development of this. I have her to thank for making going out to eat a lot easier. And while not overt activism like her vegetarian campaigning, Linda McCartney was also a feminist icon to many. Back in the 70s, it was unheard of that the wife of a rock star would join them in a band, you know, beyond being the pretty young thing to gawk at on the stage. Instead, Linda showed us who she really was, rarely wearing makeup, not shaving her legs, and never allowing herself to be objectified by the many chauvinist men of the entertainment world.
I will not change the way I dress because people don't like the way I dress, you know. I don't shave my legs. They've made such a bloody big deal about the fact that I don't shave my legs. Give me a break. I read an interview recently. I mean, I sort of avoid them, but sometimes you can't miss them. Oh, well, they say, you know, she doesn't shave her hairy legs. I mean, give me a break. You mean I'm natural? You mean Jesus Christ was natural because he had long hair? No, I think we're a little away of what life is about.
She simply didn't give a fuck, and that is the most rock and roll thing that she could have done. Between her striking photography, offbeat songs, noble activism, and being responsible for inspiring some of the most beautiful music ever recorded, we are all better off for Linda McCartney's significant impact on this world. So that's the bonus video, everyone. A little retrospective on Linda McCartney's life. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you go and turn vegetarian if you're not already. That's a lot to ask of you. You don't have to, but I would recommend it. It's great. Like I said at the top of this video, there's a lot happening. I can't wait for Now and Then. I can't wait to hear that song and watch that little documentary. I'm thinking maybe I'll do my first ever reaction video. I don't know. It's such a personal thing listening to the new Beatles song. I might record my reaction, but I don't know if I'll post it anywhere. Regardless, I will absolutely be making videos about Now and Then, about that documentary, and probably as well about the Red and Blue remasters by Giles Martin, because I enjoyed talking about them, the Revolver special edition last year. I thought it might have been Rubber Soul this year. I was really excited for Rubber Soul. But hey, we've got all these other songs dating back to their earliest recordings, which I'm very interested to see how they remastered from simple 2-track. But anyway, yeah, have a great day. Have a spooky end of the month. And I'll see you all soon. Bye.